I was right about at least one thing. This arc's culprit was in fact Mion after all, although I didn't predict a lot of the details about how it went down. First of all, Satoko said that there had never been a world in which Mion went crazy, which I find really shocking since you'd think her feelings for Keiichi would be enough to destabilize her at some point. Second of all, how exactly did Satoko get that needle into Mion at the vending machine without her even realizing it? That's gotta be one of the weirdest things I've seen in Higurashi so far. Third of all, I predicted the phone call scene to be with Mion instead of Shion this time, but in fact it was Shion after all, it was just her motivations that were different. And finally, I really didn't expect Rika's cat metaphor smackdown to be what gave her away. In this arc, it looks like we've gotten a little bit more of the timeline straightened out. The conversation at the beginning of this arc between Rika and Hanyu appears to be exactly where it's presented, directly preceding the events of this arc. But that makes you wonder, when did the conversation between Rika and Hanyu in Higurashi Go take place? Because we saw that after Onidamashi-hen was completed. But as one commenter pointed out in a previous video, in the manga, that took place before Onidamashi-hen. So we gotta wonder where that happened in the timeline, either directly before Onidamashi-hen, or maybe even as far back as after the chandelier incidents. In this arc, we saw Satoko living out the stereotype of what kids from the 80s would do if they found out they could time travel. They'd get rich gambling on sports, and so that's exactly what she does in conjunction with her uncle who has reformed from his previous lives. Now we see that happening to another character as well, Mio. She decides to abandon her diabolical plans and run away. And this brings us to another thing I got wrong about this arc. I thought someone else would reform, and that person would be directly related to Mion, which is why Satoko would inject Mion to counteract that other character softening up, but that didn't seem to be at play here unless you consider Keiichi himself. The huge development we got in this arc was finding out that if Satoko dies before Rika, then she won't be able to follow Rika into the next world. Now I really like this development because it finally puts a meaningful restriction on Satoko's power. Until now, everything on her side really seemed to be way too easy and overpowered, but at this point, we finally see some sort of pathway that could potentially lead to her downfall. The next arc is when Satoko gets abused and Oishi goes crazy. Now I don't want to sound like I'm blaming the victim here, but it's a possibility we have to at least consider. If Satoko's uncle has in fact reformed, then why would he abuse her? I think Satoko might have to pull the strings to make that happen, or perhaps she's even just pretending to be abused in the first place. And I know some people don't want to hear that, but once again, that is a possibility we have to consider. Then there's Oishi, our detective character, and we know how Ryukishio 7 loves providing a detective character to give us a trustworthy point of view when you can't trust the points of view of other characters who are going crazy left and right. So maybe that's why Satoko is choosing Oishi, because perhaps he's never gone crazy in a previous world, and by making someone like that go crazy, as with Mion, it's going to screw with Rika the most. Now, at the current pace, we're going to find out in another 3 weeks, so let's compare notes then.